Hey guys, this is Mikey from Avo Prep Academy, and you're joining me here today for our first episode of FRQ Fridays. FRQ Fridays. FRQE Fridays, where each week we tackle some FRQs from previous administrations of AP Biology. So stick around. So with the AP Biology exam just looming around the corner in May, I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk to you guys through some of these previous FRQ problems where I can let you in on some of the background information and also just the technical elements of how these questions are made. So today, let's tackle the 2022 exam, specifically number 2, which typically is a graphing question. Now, the reason that I'm not doing number 1 is that I have actually already solved through that problem because it's sort of something that pertains to Unit 4, and I'll link that in the description below, so you'll have access to questions number 1 and number 2 after you watch this video. And before we go on any further, if you're interested in content that's specifically catered to AP Biology, then you've found the right channel, so be sure to like and subscribe. Now let's go over to my computer so we can look at these problems together. Alrighty, so looking at number 2, or any of these questions for that matter, I first like to gain a sense of what type of question I am dealing with and what unit we're going to be most likely have to recall. Now, firstly, because it is number 2 on the FRQ, it's almost always going to be a graphing question. And without knowing anything else about the topic, I can already see that we have this table we'll most likely have to graph anyway. Now, second, looking at the diagram, I can see that we're dealing with Unit 5 on heredity to a certain degree. So let's take a quick look. During meiosis, double-strand breaks occur in chromatids. The breaks are either repaired by the exchange of genetic material between homologous non-sister chromatids, which is a process known as crossing over. Yep, that's our Unit 5 right there. Or they're simply repaired without any crossing over. So far we have just some background information, but here is some context that's coming up. Plant breeders developing new varieties of corn are interested in determining whether, in corn, a correlation exists between the number of meiotic double-strand chromatid breaks and the number of crossovers. Okay, so at this point, we have a few things to keep in mind. First, we have to remember that the entire purpose of meiosis, aside from the obvious of making gametes that are haploid, is that we're trying to create as much genetic variation as possible. And secondly, knowing that crossing over can create new recombination between various genes or loci along our chromosomes, we're looking at how breeders can use that information to create additional varieties of crops, which makes sense. So now they give us a diagram of crossing over and non-crossing over here, which I think at this point is kind of useless, but let's continue reading. Using specialized staining and microscopy techniques, scientists counted the number of double-strand chromatid breaks and the number of crossovers in the same number of meiotic gamete-forming cells of 6 inbred strains of corn. So the takeaway here is that they looked at 6 different strains of corn, all of which having varying degrees of double-strand breaks and some number of crossovers that correspond to that particular number. Now, here I like to generally take a look at some of the relationships that may form within the numbers in our table. And looking at the numbers of double-strand breaks, we see a decrease in the number of double-strand breaks from strains 1 through 6. Now, they probably just labeled the strains in accordance to that particular parameter, but we also see that there seems to be a decreasing number of crossovers in that sort of same direction, meaning that there is absolutely a correlation between the number of double-strand breaks and the number of crossovers. Now, this checks out because more double-strand breaks, more likely that there are greater opportunities for that crossover instead of simply repairing, as we saw in Figure 1. So this means that strain 1 with the largest number of double-strand breaks as well as the number of crossovers is more likely to have the greatest possibility of creating more varieties of corn than strain 2, which is more likely to do so than strain 3, and so on. Okay, so far so good. Now let's take a look at some of these questions. A goes, the double-strand breaks occur along the DNA backbone. Describe the process by which the breaks occur. Now, in many of my other videos, I mentioned how important it is to know the limits of what AP Biology is asking you. They're not asking you to get super organic chemistry with this question, but based on what you learned in Unit 1 on the chemistry of life, what can we say that is sufficiently going to answer this question? Well, so let's take a look. In Unit 1, we learned a bit of biochemistry. There, we learned that there were 4 macromolecules, including nucleic acids, that includes DNA, obviously. The polymer that is nucleic acid, though, is held together via covalent bonds that we specifically call phosphodiester bonds. But the fact that it's a covalent bond found between monomers of, well, macromolecules, we always break this using water through a process that we call hydrolysis. So that is a fact-based question straight from Unit 1. So the answer goes something like this. The DNA backbone is composed of covalent bonds between nucleotides, which are broken by hydrolysis. In hydrolysis, a water molecule is added to break the bonds, placing H and OH onto each of the two resulting monomers. Now, I just added a little bit more detail there. But something like that should be perfectly sufficient for A. Okay, so let's move on to Part B. Part B says construct a graph that represents the data in Table 1. It also has to allow for the examination of a possible correlation between double-strand breaks and crossovers. And then we have to determine whether corn strains 1, 2, and 3 differ in their average number of crossovers. And we'll get to that part in just a few minutes. Now, first, the graph. Now, when we want to look for correlations between double-strand breaks and crossovers, we're definitely going to be using a scatter plot. Why? Well, because bar graphs do not show correlation between two variables that are continuous, but rather how one categorical data can represent some other, mostly numerical data. Like, for example, how a fertilizer brand might affect the overall plant growth, where the fertilizer brands are just simply names. But here we're looking at two continuous, non-categorical or nominal variables like the number of double-strand breaks and the number of crossover events, and how those two relate to one another. So knowing that, let's go ahead and draw our graph. Now first, the x-axis should be the number of double-strand breaks. So logically, this kind of makes sense because there's always a possibility of a crossover whenever a double-strand break is found, but there's also the possibility that there's not a crossover. So it sort of is the determining factor. And also, they do mention double-strand breaks first and then crossovers in the questions, so let's actually put the double-strand breaks on the x-axis, and we'll place the number of crossovers on the y-axis. Now, it's also helpful to note that your smallest value and your largest value, so you can maximize the usage of your axis space. So here we have 300 to 750 on the x-axis for our number of double-strand breaks, and I'll put up to 20 for the average number of crossovers. Now, placing each of the correlated points gives us a graph that looks something like this. But remember, we have standard error values given to us as well. With adding the standard error bars, we get the finalized graph that looks something like this. Now note that the most important parts are here. Correctly labeled axes with their units, good usage of space, proper graph, and error bars. Also note the strains of corn too for some added detail. Now remember how they wanted us to determine whether strains 1, 2, and 3 were different? Now let's do that. Okay, so there are two different ways that we can approach this. We can either use the graph if you're really accurate, but I like to use the table with the actual numerical values and the standard errors. So in this table, we're given the average number of crossovers, but each value has a plus or minus sign. So the way that we know whether two values are different in a statistically significant way is by making sure that the values extending from our averages by these errors don't overlap with one another. So here we see that the lowest value of strain 1 is 19, which is 19.5 minus 0.5, while the highest value of strain 2 is going to be 18.7. So clearly there's no overlap. But on the other hand, the lowest value of that same strain is 17.3, while the highest value for strain 3 is 18.5. So there's definitely an overlap there. And comparing strains 1 and 3, yeah, there's definitely going to be a difference there as well. So I'll put something like this. There is a significant difference in the number of crossovers between strains 1 and 2, but there's no significant difference between 2 and 3. There's also a difference between strain 1 and 3. Now, there are other variations of that statement that you can use, but as long as you understand that the standard error bars overlapping denote that there's no difference, you're going to be okay. Now, let's take a look at Part C. Based on the data, describe the relationship between the average number of double-strand breaks and the average number of crossovers in the strains of corn analyzed in the experiment. So here's something that we had actually anticipated before. It's pretty obvious that there is a relationship, but we want to be a little bit more descriptive. So the relationship that we're looking at is what we call a positive correlation, which is used to describe a pair of data sets that rise and fall together, which is exactly what we see here. So simply put, we write, there exists a positive correlation between the number of double-strand breaks and the average number of crossovers, meaning that as the number of double-strand breaks increases, so does the number of crossovers. Great. So the last part is always the tricky one, so let's check it out. Crossing over creates physical connections that are required for proper segregation of homologous chromosomes during meiosis. A diploid cell with 4 pairs of homologous chromosomes undergoes meiosis to produce 4 haploid cells. Crossing over occurs between only 3 of the pairs, so now we have to predict the number of chromosomes most likely present in each of the 4 haploid cells and provide reasoning. So let's pause there and tackle this first part. So the question is like a riddle, where it gives you a bunch of conditions and expects you to figure out what may happen if some of those conditions are broken. Basically, they state here that crossing over is required for homologous chromosomes to separate during meiosis, and that's our condition. Now, another condition is that we have a diploid cell with 4 pairs of homologous chromosomes, meaning that the 2n value of this cell is 8. Now, this also means that normal gametes, which has an n number of chromosomes, should have an n value of 4. So that should be normal. They also tell us that crossing over occurs between only 3 pairs, meaning that 1 pair of homologous chromosomes do not separate properly. But wait a minute, we've actually seen this before, because in Unit 5, we learned this as nondisjunction. And in nondisjunction, we create haploid cells that have either too many chromosomes or too few chromosomes. But in this question, we have to be a little bit careful. When they say that homologous chromosomes fail to separate when no crossover occurs, this means that nondisjunction is happening at meiosis 1 and not 2, because this is in meiosis 1 where the homologous chromosomes separate at anaphase, or anaphase 1. So this means that from the first round of division, one cell is getting 5 chromosomes while the other is only getting 3. And once these cells undergo another division in meiosis 2, we would end up with 2 gametes that have 5 chromosomes each, because each of those 5 chromosomes would have split into 5 daughter chromosomes, because the sister chromatids separate and become daughter chromosomes, and the other one would only end up with 3 chromosomes each. So the answer is that 2 of the gametes will have 5 chromosomes, while the other 2 will have 3 chromosomes, because nondisjunction in meiosis 1 results in the failure of proper chromosomal distribution. Now, although meiosis 2 would occur ordinarily, you would still end up with 2 cells that have n+1 and 2 cells that have n-1. Now, the second part of this question says, explain how plant breeders can use information in Table 1 to help develop new varieties of corn. Now, this is another idea that we sort of talked about earlier. New varieties come from greater genetic variation coming from crossing over. So knowing which strains produce more crossovers, breeders can be selective about which strains to mix and create as much variation in these corn offspring as possible. So that about sums up all of the questions for question number 2. Now, I hope that this video was helpful in helping you through this question from 2022. Next week, I think I'll just continue off from here and maybe cover questions 3 through 6, because those are shorter questions that I think we can kind of condense together into a single weekly episode. So if you haven't done so already, be sure to click like and subscribe and maybe the bell icon so you're aware when we drop that next video. This has been Mikey with Able Prep Academy. Have a great weekend.